other youth workers or youth facilitators around self-harm, just be really aware. It's a highly triggering subject. Often people don't realise that they may have been self-harming themselves in maybe in a sort of minor way, but it can ring quite a few bells for quite a lot of people. So I wanted to go through like the confidentiality stuff first and sort of get that out of the way, because that way we're doing all the right things. So best practice says we should ensure that a young person has a right to privacy and confidentiality unless the information suggests that they might be at risk. Young people should be actively engaged and given a voice when talking about self-harm. This needs to be included in a discussion about next steps that will be taken, how further to support them, how they will access that support, and how and when relevant people will be informed. Confidentiality should be clearly explained to young people at all times. Now, I know you probably all know that, but it's really just a reminder that how important confidentiality is, but equally how important it is to bring it up every time, because sometimes things come up and you can never think that this session isn't going to trigger anything for anybody. You just have no idea what people are carrying. So it is actually quite important that you're bringing up your confidentiality before every single session, and that way at least you're sort of covering yourself. And also we know that young people sometimes disclose because they want you to share. So as long as you've done your confidentiality, you'll sort of get a better understanding of whether they're actually sharing because they wanted to keep it secret with you, or whether they actually were sharing because they really did want to tell you, they wanted it to end. And for most people, self-harm is something that you're trying to get a hold of. Okay, a tiny bit more. So information is only going to be shared without consent when a young person is at risk of harm from other people. They require urgent medical help. They present the risk of harm to others, and they are at risk of serious injury themselves. Okay, so I wanted just to talk very quickly just about my background and where I come from. So my professional background, I started as a detached youth worker, and then I became a young people drug and alcohol worker. And I did that for quite a long time before I set up KIP Education and started doing what I'm doing. So unlike a lot of facilitators, I still work with young people. I'm still working on the ground in very similarly to how a lot of you guys are as well. But in my personal background, I'm diagnosed with ADHD now, and I take medication every day. Which is amazing, has been completely life-changing for me. Having a diagnosis and an understanding of why I think and feel in the way that I do has been, yeah, it's been amazing, if I'm honest. And I wouldn't be surprised if some of the young people that you're working with are also fit into that category. And for people with ADHD, a lot of what comes with ADHD is a lot of anxiety and a lot of self-worth stuff. So when I was 7, I started self-harming. I had a cut on my foot, and I just picked it and interfered with it, and that became something that I started to do quite regularly, and I started to make these things to interfere with. And I didn't know it was self-harming. I know I don't look it, but this is pre-internet, pre-contagion and all of that sort of thing. And yeah, and but I did know that it was wrong, and I know that now because years later, as an adult, I didn't tell anybody and I didn't share it. And I continued to self-harm for quite a long time in my life. And that sort of moved on to taking drugs, eating disorders, and I had quite unhealthy relationships with friends. So if you sort of put those all together, you can really see how those sort of risky behaviours, how they sort of fall into the next one. So that sort of continued. So my friendships, I would be friends with people who maybe weren't particularly nice to me or didn't look after me or did things that I didn't approve of, which meant that I would end up doing things like that also. And it meant that I started to get into quite a cycle of being outside of my comfort zone. And I was quite comfortable being uncomfortable. And I don't know if that's something that a lot of you can identify with. It's very British to not be like, allow your joy to happen. Yeah, you know, I mean, like, I don't know, some people, like, I don't know, sometimes I go and put my kids in bed and they're fast asleep. I'm like, oh, you're just gorgeous, you're just divine, I just love everything about you. And then I go, oh, please don't die, please don't let anything happen to you, because I can't be, the joy is too hard to hold on to, and it's much easier to hold on to the pain, and it's quite common to sort of feel like that. So I guess that's really my my background and my how I'm here to talk about those kinds of things with you guys. And whilst I'm telling you my story and my background around self-harm, I would be very, very careful about talking specifically about actual harming behaviours with young people. It can be quite triggering. I don't think it's that necessary either in delivering good work around self-harm and in talking and treating self-harm. Equally, we need to be very aware when we're outside of our skill set. And if you feel like it's outside of your skill set, you need to make sure that you're referring on or passing it on or getting supervision around that. And does anyone have any questions before we start? I can't see the chat, so I'm just gonna not, but Lydia, I can see you, and Pete. So if there's something in the chat, just do like a dance and then I'll know. Okay, great. Okay, so yeah, so my first thing was, what feelings do self-harm bring up for you? And I wanted to sort of check in with you, because often when I talk about self-harming, I see people squirming, and the thought of it is just ow, ooh. It just makes them all like in a bit of a state. And I think quite a lot of that can come across with a young person. So, you know, when young people disclose stuff to us, they sort of want to see your reaction. And if your reaction is you can't help your micro mannerisms, we have to really sort of take control of those micro mannerisms, because if your feelings around self-harm are, it's gross, it's dangerous, it's stupid, it's going to come across. And if a young person is even thinking about telling you something like that, they need to know where it is for you. So I just wanted you to sort of check in with yourself about what feelings around self-harm bring up for you. Okay, so harming behaviours. So I've put some things up here, and I wanted to sort of get you to have a look at them and see if you think that they are self-harm. I'm quite interested. Are we allowed to talk in the chat? Are we allowed to write in the chat? Is that something? I don't know if we are. She's nodding. Yeah, so if you want to write in the chat, I'd be very interested. If you want to say something, just say it, actually. I'm very interested to know what you think, whether you think these are harming behaviours. Does anyone want to have a thought around it? This is meant to be exercise, not people like running from their husbands or wives or children or something. Oh, good. People got my joke there. Where is the chat? Where can I find that? Has anyone written in the chat, Lydia? No. Okay, fine. So I'm just going to, will you just mute everyone? Let's mute everyone, because it's a bit, there's someone got some talking in the background that's just like turn around, and I have to look at everyone. Am I muted? I'm muted. No, she's saying no. She's doing all that hand signals. Okay. So some people may think that overeating could be self-harm. Eating food that you know is bad for you is harming for you. Smoking cigarettes could be seen as self-harm, obviously injecting. So I sort of wanted to put it up there to, there's a difference between like actual self-injury and harming behaviours. And I think quite a lot of you can probably relate to harming behaviours if you've ever been on a diet before, or not been on a diet before, or said you're going to exercise and not, or yeah, that sort of thing. Or like maybe picked a scab, you know, just not intentionally, but yeah, but probably done a bit more damage, things like that. So I want you to sort of, the idea of this is so that you can start to relate to self-harming, because it's probably not so far removed from some behaviours that you do. So I don't know if any of you, when you've had like a really rubbish day or a really heavy day at work, just come home and just like eat your house. And for some of you, you may do that, or just eat way more than you would normally eat. That's a coping mechanism, and often we do that because we just, yeah, we want a bit of peace and quiet. You know, that minute where you're shoving 20 biscuits into your mouth, you're just not thinking. There's complete silence that washes over your mind, and your self-harm is very like that. So the Royal College of Physicists defines self-harm as a behaviour, action or habit causing detrimental health. We've got harming behaviours and we've got self-injury. Harming behaviour is to act in a way that has a long-term impact on your physical or emotional self. And self-injury is to deliberately harm yourself, causing immediate, tangible physical injuries. For the majority of you, the young people that you're working with that are self-harming, that you know of, it's probably that superficial lines on the arms or legs or somewhere there, external torso, not outside of the torso, basically. I wanted to, does everyone know who this guy is? Van Gogh, I don't know how you pronounce it. If you're posh or not posh, or if you're French or whatever, this is like a really good example of a self-harmer, you know. So I don't know if anyone knows the story, but his brother slept with the woman he loved, and I think she fell in love with the brother, and he just couldn't handle it. They cut off his ear, and it sounds like so dramatic, but in the midst of something, when we're trying to cope, we do stuff maybe that isn't particularly healthy. So the statistics say that 1 in 5 15-year-olds say that they regularly self-harm, and that's the ones that we know of. And in my opinion, self-harm is something that people do in secret, and the same with eating disorders. You know, just think, I want to carry on doing it, so I'm not going to tell you, because as soon as I tell you, you're going to have a problem with it. We also know that the onset of people self-harming, the average age is about 12, and the average age of disclosure is 15, which means there's a full few years where that young person is basically by themselves trying to tackle and deal with whatever they're trying to deal with. And it's not just, you know, you look back and say, oh, 2 years is maybe not that long, but in young people terms, 2 years is a really long time. I don't know about you, but last summer came and went for me. It was as quick as that. You know, I'm a grown up, but when I was 14, my summer was long, and it was, you know, so think how long a year is, think how long 2 years is at that age. And, you know, couple that with that real darkness that comes with coping in that way, in such a negative way, and that isolation that comes with all of that. It's tough. So if any young person is disclosing to you that they've started to self-harm, you want to be really gentle with them and really kind and empathic with them. Okay, so I just wanted to show you a few more statistics as well. So I'm just checking there's no one's asking a question. Fantastic. Okay, sorry, let's just get rid of that chat. Oh, apparently I can't. That's annoying. Okay, so we've got girls are more likely than boys, but it's not to say that boys don't self-harm. Boys also self-harm. Children with low well-being or poor mental health are more likely to self-harm. I mean, these things, for me, it's just obvious, really, isn't it? People from lower incomes tend to run a higher risk. Young people who are attracted to the same or both genders are also higher risk. And 1 in 6 young people have self-harmed in the last year. So that's quite a, for me, I felt like that was quite a worrying picture. And I don't see those figures going down at the moment. Whilst I see that we are getting a grip on mental health and we are getting a grip on how we talk and treat young people, I still believe that young people's mental health is partly still on the decline as well as the incline as well. So we're seeing quite a lot of positive stuff, but equally a lot of negative stuff. And this whole experience that we're going through right now, look, you can see I've got an empty office. No, really, I'm at home. It's my background. But it's, we're on our own, you know, we're on our own. It's very traumatic for some of us. And we can't sort of underestimate the trauma that has come out of that. I know that for BEAT, the eating disorders charity, their calls have gone up 30 to 40% since lockdown. So for a lot of the young people that you're working with, they are trying to cope. And if I don't have a good coping mechanism, I'm just going to go to my coping mechanisms that I always have gone to, whatever I normally turn to. And if that's self-harm, then that's self-harm. If that's sugar, then that's sugar. You know, we're all, we cope how we want to cope. Okay, so let's keep going. So these are probably some of the self-harms that you've heard of. It's not limited at all. There's obviously all different ways. I used to also cut my eyelashes as well. That was a really, I used to do that quite a lot. It's a weird thing. It's an unexplainable reason. Most people who self-harm have not been taught by somebody else. It tends to be something that you've just picked up. We see it with very young children with the hair pulling and the banging against the wall. You'll see that quite commonly with young people. And it's a soothing thing. You know, for example, my daughter, I took her dummy away when she was however old, and she just started sucking these 2 fingers at her heart. It was disgusting. It just looked absolutely vile, but short of like cutting off her hand, there's not much that you can do, but you have to sort of understand that they're soothing themselves and they're trying to soothe themselves. Okay. So yeah, we've got lots of different things. Falling down the stairs. I don't know if any of you have seen that. 13. It's worth watching. I wouldn't watch it with young people. I wouldn't watch any of these sort of self-harming 13 reasons. I mean, all of that for me is way glamorizing. And just touching on that 13 reasons, it's so unrealistic. It just wouldn't happen like that. You know, there's no statistics to show that it happens like that. So it's and we have seen young people around the world who have copycatted that sort of thing, which is just beyond tragic. So it shows you that glamorizing stuff like that is just, it's a route for danger. And I know as youth workers, we just want to do good work. We don't want to, we definitely don't want to be making it worse or causing any more problems. Okay. So some myths and facts around self-harm, and I want to sort of dispel some of these myths, this sort of concepts that people are thinking about self-harm. So the first is self-harm is attention seeking. So not, and it's such an insult to somebody who is actually self-harming. Majority of self-harming happens in private. And if a young person is being quite open about it, I would be very worried about their self-worth. But it looks like they're reaching out to you. So, I mean, it upsets me when I hear teachers go, well, you know, they're just attention seeking. Well, why are they attention seeking? What have they got going on? What's upsetting them? What are they struggling with? And maybe if we tackle that, we're looking beyond the behaviour. Self-harm is a suicide attempt. For most people, self-harm is a way of staying alive. We use it to cope. It's the complete opposite of trying to kill themselves. If someone is suicidal or is talking about suicide, you really should take what they're saying quite seriously, and make sure that you're putting things in place. This session isn't about suicidal ideation. It's about self-harm. So I'm going to just sort of leave that sort of there. But people who self-harm, they're trying to cope. They're not trying to die. And that's why we don't take away people's self-harming implements. I hear of parents who say, oh, we've just hidden everything. You know, we're like spreading butter on our toast with a spoon. Well, if I want to self-harm and you haven't given me any coping mechanisms, I will self-harm, and I will find something to self-harm with. And if you've taken away my object, then I will find another object, and that's an object that I'm not really sure how to use, and that's when I could make a mistake and we could have problems. People who self-harm enjoy pain. I mean, when you think about it, it's ridiculous. It doesn't even make sense. Everyone's a human being. Nobody enjoys pain, and nobody enjoys that sort of distress. So yeah, I mean, if I think back to my bulimia and my self-harm, actually, I used to have to really sort of psych myself up for it, but I wanted to do that. So I would still have this sort of period of time before I was like, no, but I end up just doing it again. Okay. So these are some of the reasons why people do self-harm, and there are tons. You're not limited here. So coping with feelings, relieving guilt and self-hatred, control, communication, a feeling real and alive. I think I was in a lot of pain as a young person. I didn't feel like I fitted in anywhere. I didn't feel like I was good enough. And I don't know about you guys, but I sort of grew up in an environment where we got shamed a lot. You know, you did something wrong, you got shamed. You weren't clever enough, you got shamed. You didn't work hard enough, you got shamed. And there was a lot of shame. And I think when you've got low self-esteem and self-worth, you've got a lot of shame already. Like, you don't need anyone adding to the shame that you're sort of adding to yourself. But what I didn't put there was that sort of the numbing effect. So just those moments when you're cutting that you're not thinking. I don't know if any of you have like done any kind of exercise before, but you have that similar sort of thing. Like if I made you do an obstacle course, you wouldn't be thinking about anything because you'd be too busy thinking about what you need to do. And that's sort of how self-harm works. Very similarly to if you were eating a ton of crisps or eating 20 biscuits, those moments, just a bit of silence. It's just a bit of peace. You get the bit of guilt before, you have a bit of peace for a bit while you're doing it. It could be seconds. At the beginning, I think you get quite a lot more than you do later on. And then afterwards, you've got the shame. I'm going to show you the sort of cycle around with self-harm as well. These are some other trigger factors. And I just sort of put them up there. I mean, it could be for anybody the same. You know, it could be a lot of these things. It could be less of those things. It could be one of those things, and it could be a culmination of those things. I think these are also risk factors when it comes to anything, any sort of risky behaviour, drugs and alcohol, sexualised behaviour, stuff like that. When we don't feel good enough, or we've not been able to talk about something that's traumatic to us, or not been taken seriously about something that was traumatic to us, that can cause significant stuff in the brain. And it's stuff that we don't tell people. You know, I don't know if I said this before, but had I mentioned to my parents that I was upset, they would have supported me. But I was 7. I just could not communicate that. I couldn't communicate that I didn't feel like I fitted in, because I didn't think anybody felt like that. So I don't want to say I feel like that, because no one else feels like that. I don't want to be the one, you know, it's embarrassing. I don't want to be the embarrassed one or the stupid one. And instead you put on this sort of brave face. To anybody else, they looking at me at school, they would have said I was a very confident person, definitely. And I really wasn't at all. Okay. So we know also that some people are more at risk. So anyone who's got any sort of depression, anxiety, BDP, borderline personality disorder, eating disorders, that puts you more at risk. Young people who are in care, or young people who have left care, if you're part of the LGBT community, or if you have been bereaved by suicide, all of that is more likely to be, and that's just linked to statistics, really, not really anything else. Okay, so the functions of self-harm. So I don't know what's brought you to this session today. Maybe you're just trying to escape from your own families, or maybe you're just trying to become better youth workers. But I think for a lot of people who have never self-harmed or don't know people who self-harmed, they do not get the functions of it. It just seems stupid and wrong, and it's just where we're at. It's what people do. When people find something that works for them and they don't tell people about it and they do it repeatedly, then it just becomes a thing that you can do again and again. So yeah, it's interesting. I don't do it to get attention. I do it to avoid attention. And I don't think people even see that either, that sort of concept that I'm struggling, but I don't want you to know I'm struggling. So instead, I'm just going to do my struggle on my own. I mean, I don't know if any you can do hands up or anything, but I can imagine that quite a lot of you, when you feel a bit down, you listen to like really depressing music and make yourself feel more down. Maybe you've got a hand up. Loads of people do it. It's really, really common. And in fact, if you go onto like Spotify and look up depressed, you'll see like so many playlists, because people like it. So you know, we have to go through our feelings, and just people do it in different ways. So I guess the main function would be regulating your emotions, to sort of try and manage unbearable emotions. And whilst I've put unbearable emotions, I also believe that it can get to a point where it's just to manage emotions in general, and it's not even unbearable. Yeah, I guess it is unbearable. It's that you might not find that emotion unbearable, but for me really, as a teenager and a young person, I didn't really feel any emotions, because all the heavy emotions that I felt, I either self-harmed, took drugs, had unhealthy relationships, you know, all of those things. So I didn't really feel, I couldn't cope with being uncomfortable. Definitely they're more sensitive to their emotions, but that's kind of obvious. If you haven't really experienced them properly, then when it comes down to experiencing them, it's going to be hard work. And also on top of it, for me, is my ADHD. And for other people with ADHD or any kind of mood disorder, regulating your mood when you've got a mood disorder is really, really tough, and getting stuff wrong and not being bright and getting told off is, it all adds. It's very hard to cope with. I put down there, self-harm isn't romantic or edgy. It's a result of a lot of mental and emotional suffering. So the brain responds, and I want to sort of explain to you about the brain and how it responds. So it responds to physical pain by releasing these endogenous sort of opioids that are similar to morphine. So it feels good, right? And if we experience significant emotional pain, the brain doesn't respond by releasing that. So we're left sort of with that sort of numb feeling, maybe of crying, or, you know, we don't feel that soothing effect. So the cutting actually gives you the soothing effect that you may have been looking for, a bit like when you overeat, it releases also similar things. So you can do this in a much more healthy way. Like, any of you ever like gone for a run before and you come back and you're just like, woo, yeah, I feel amazing. And you've released all those amazing endorphins that make you feel really much more beneficial than cutting. But I mean, for me, the 7-year-old me, in fact, the 13-year-old me, the 14-year-old me, the 15-year-old me, I didn't have a clue about any of that. You know, I didn't even know what kale was. I just didn't have a clue about nothing. So it's a strategy. Whether you like it or not, it's a strategy. And self-harm is a strategy used to change emotional pain into physical pain so that the brain releases chemicals that help us cope. That kind of makes sense when you look at it like that. It doesn't feel so absurd when you put it out there like that. Okay, so it's not suicide, it's to release anxiety. It's a coping mechanism to help improve life. It sounds like you, because you're adults as well. So it's funny because when I talk about self-harm, I wouldn't talk about it with everybody, if I'm honest, because people just don't get it. I definitely wouldn't like bring it up at the dining room table and have like a chat with my family. They'd be horrified. But people who get self-harm, they get it. You know, we're a unified group of people. So just like have a look here. This is the self-harm cycle, and it usually starts as a way to relieve the build-up of pressure from distressing thoughts and feelings. You might get some temporary relief, like from that sort of emotional pain, if you're even aware of that. It's definitely temporary because the feelings haven't gone away, and whatever's the issue hasn't gone away either. But pretty much like binge eating, soon afterwards you feel guilt and shame, and that sort of continues the cycle. And depending on how much damage you've done as well, it can cause this physical pain. So for me, because I was cutting my feet, it made it quite difficult to wear shoes and walk comfortably. So I would put tissues in my socks to make my school shoes more comfortable. And tissues are just not comfortable either. You know, they're not plasters. It's not what we use when you cut yourself badly. And so I would feel very uncomfortable in the day, and I'd be very irritable. Really, all I wanted to do was actually take my shoes and my socks off and just let my feet breathe because they were uncomfortable. But instead, my feet were uncomfortable, my feet were in pain, and to anybody else, they would have just thought, you are so moody and so irritable and so impossible to talk to. And that was true. But that wasn't my intention. And in fact, my intention was the complete opposite. And had I been able to articulate my emotions better in words, I think I would have had to ask for a bit of attention and cuddles and all the things that human beings need, particularly when they're in physical and emotional pain. So it is the idea, well, this is what I'm trying to get you to have a look at now, is to focus. If you're working with a young person who's self-harming, or you think they're self-harming, we're trying to replace the self-harm mechanism with a healthy alternative coping strategy in a really nice, gentle way. I would always say that if a young person discloses to you about their self-harming, to really listen, like your best listening, and listening is probably the best thing you can do. And I wouldn't expect that you will be able to sort this in one conversation. It may take years to really sort of tackle all of this stuff. So these are possibly some of the things that young people that I've worked with. These are some of the things that they might have presented with. So when I say looking beyond the behaviour, I always say that, to be honest. We deliver training around risky behaviour, and we deliver drug training and all sorts of other training. And I would always say, look beyond the behaviour. I found it always very unhelpful when any sort of worker or psychologist or whatever would always say to me, just, stop cutting, stop making yourself sick, and let me know how you got on next week. And then you come back and I don't feel like I can talk to you, because I may have done that because I was struggling with all this huge list of things here. I was struggling with all of those, and instead of dealing with those because I didn't really understand them, I just went back to my other coping mechanism. And those coping mechanisms can come and bite you years later. I'm very careful with my food and what I eat, because it affects my mood, and it affects how I feel. And if my mood is affected and my feelings are affected, how I treat other people is also affected. So how do you approach a person who is not feeling well? Now, I put this here because I think we need to be very sensitive to young people who self-harm. And anybody who's suffering with self-confidence and self-worth stuff is not well, inside not well, mental health not well. So if I was a doctor and I say, how do you approach somebody who's, I don't know, got some illness, I might approach them in one way. And equally, you want to be thinking of this young person as someone who is really quite troubled and really struggling. So we just have to think about the context. I try not to trivialize anything a young person says to me, whilst I may have days where a young person comes in and she says, oh, I love Clive and Clive loves Hayley and I'm just so upset about it. And you're like, oh, Clive's an idiot. I don't know why you're looking at Clive. I need to be very sensitive, and it might be no deal to me about Clive and Hayley, but to this young person, it's a huge deal, and it's relevant to them. So I just really try and let young people have space to talk, and I make sure I'm really listening, and you're listening because you actually answer what they're saying. And I strongly suggest practicing this with your family, practicing it, but I suspect that probably none of you actively listen to the best of your ability. Okay, so listening, asking open-ended questions, taking what they say seriously. You may need to get other support if you need to. Really stay calm. Stay with that person if their safety is in jeopardy, and empathise. I can't stress empathy enough. So I'm just going to take you back to when I was a drug worker. About 10 years ago, I had a young person who was a crack user and a heavy self-harmer. And she'd self-harmed with her legs with scissors quite badly. And they'd called an ambulance. And instead of saying that she self-harmed, she said that she was attacked. She had crack on her, and she said that someone tried to take the crack from her, and that they'd come up behind her and stabbed her 11 times in the legs. And the ambulance knew that it wasn't true. It's kind of obvious, I guess, as well. If someone's going to attack you, they're not going to come behind you to stab you at the front of your legs, and stabbing you 11 times, they probably want to do damage. They probably would have done it on your body. All these different things why an ambulance might think that isn't what happened. But instead of making her feel comfortable and safe, they really shamed her, embarrassed her for it. And she never told anybody what had happened that night. And it was weeks later when we were having a one-to-one a drug session where she literally just pulled down her trousers and said, "Look, this is what I've done. I can't. It's not getting better, and I'm upset about it all." And I had to be so calm and so comforting in the way that a youth worker can be, actually. But truly, when after the session finished and she left the building and I went back into the office, I just broke down in tears. I could not stop crying. It really overwhelmed me. Firstly, my connection to the whole situation, but equally my love for young people and my passion for helping young people. And it hurts. And don't underestimate the fatigue and the stress that a disclosure can put on you when it's a young person who you care about, or any young person. Yes, I just want you to sort of be aware of that. I don't know what your supervision is like or who's supporting you with your young people. But if you're unsure of something, ask. And if something that you believe is fairly traumatic has happened, you make sure that you get the support that you need. Because that really impacts. I mean, I've got lots of stories like that, but it impacts you. It impacts you when someone shows you their own scars. So how we talk to young people, like the approach. So I'm just checking where we are with the time. Okay, I've still got time. So your approach. So focus on listening. Try not to talk too much. Hard for me, my ADHD and just me. Don't pretend to understand if you don't understand. Don't be afraid to make eye contact, offer support, acknowledge how hard it is to discuss these issues. Don't assume that an apparently negative response is actually a negative response, and don't break your promises or make promises that you can't keep. And this is just basic youth work. This is not just for tackling and talking to young people who self-harm. This is how we should be working. We're working in that really nice, holistic, supportive way. We're not there to judge young people. They're being judged all the time by other people, by their peers, by other, I mean, I still see in schools all the time teachers shaming young people, their behaviour, their attitude, how they're walking, everything, The way we talk is really important, and it's really important if we want young people to even bother to talk to us. Then we need to make sure we are, we're sort of mirroring that sort of nice behaviour, but also to bear in mind that, like I said, some of these young people, they're in pain, they're in physical pain, physical pain can make you very irritable. I say to my son sometimes that I really want to be nice to you and I really want to be supportive of you, but you're like a cactus right now and you're very prickly. I'm not able to cuddle you and be kind to you because you're so angry about whatever's happened. But try and communicate that. Try and communicate feelings, because you will teach a young person how to communicate theirs as well if you're able to put yours into words as well. So I wanted to talk a bit about validation and how you validate young people's feelings. A lot of why young people self-harm is if they don't feel that they're being heard or they don't feel like they're being understood. So what you need to look at what's understandable about how they are thinking, feeling, or behaving. And there's probably quite a lot of things that are understandable. Just because you agree with a young person, it doesn't mean that you approve of what they're doing, but you can still agree and you can see why they do things. One of the things that used to happen to me was particularly with my self-harm and my bulimia, would be that as I got sort of into recovery and I got better, I had these much bigger spaces in between the self-harm, big spaces. So it might have been that it started off with weeks. It might have been that then it became months. It might have been 2 years later that I did something. And then all that guilt and all that shame comes back again. And I remember a therapist saying to me, that's what you do sometimes. That's your coping mechanism. Like, it's okay that you've done that. You just did that because that's what you do. And doesn't mean you're going to do it again. Doesn't mean you're back in the same cycle again. It just means that you didn't know what else to do at that time. And it was lovely to have someone to understand and agree with me and understand that I couldn't find another solution at that point. This way of validating young people will help bring down the emotion and help them feel heard. And once we feel heard, we don't necessarily need the coping mechanism. Okay. Just a bit more on validation. So active listening, making eye contact, be mindful of your verbal and non-verbal reactions. No eye rolling and looking out the window and checking your phone and all of that stuff. But we need to be very, very careful, because the teeniest, tiniest micro mannerism of I'm not interested, even if you are interested, it might be that you've got like a really important text coming through from, I don't know, self-employed government grant. Any of you doing that today? But it might be that you've got that. So you might have looked at your phone for 1 second, and if I'm a young person who's already decided that I'm not important, I'm not interesting, my point isn't to be valid, then I'm looking for you to make that mistake. I'm looking for you to look away and to not be thinking about me. So be really mindful of your body language. They reckon 98% of what is communicated is not verbal. So yeah, your body and how you react is probably giving all of the rest of that information. Observe what the person is feeling in that moment. Try to reflect back the feeling without judgment. I like to sort of reflect back the feeling that I see, and if I've got it wrong, a young person will just correct me. So I might say, oh, it sounds like you're really angry with that person. I go, no, I wasn't angry. They really upset me and they hurt my feelings. And just by trying to name feelings, you're helping them to sort of name feelings. Remember why you're validating as well. You're trying to reduce their distress and you're trying to help them be understood. And I would sort of pause on that as well, that you want to be doing that with any risky behaviour. Okay, you're trying to reduce that young person's distress and helping them to feel understood, and that will validate them. Okay, listening and understanding. It is understandable that it has come to this, so it's okay at this moment for that young person to be where they are. And if they feel understood, they're much more likely to be open to change, and they're much more likely to come back and talk to you. Like, even if you only have a 5-minute conversation about it, if you're open and you're empathic and kind, they will come back to you and talk more with you, which is exactly what you want. And also to know that for some young people, definitely to me, articulating why I do a lot of things is really, really hard to articulate why. So if any of you have ever, I'm going to use diet because I think that's like a grown-up problem, middle, you know, that most people can relate to, or being healthy or something like that. So for those of you who want to be healthy and you're not, but you really want to be, and it doesn't make any sense why, but you're just not, because you can't really explain it. You can't explain why sometimes you just want to eat 7 croissants, or I don't know, whatever it is. Sometimes we just can't explain what is going on for us. And a lot of it normally is to do with like shame or context. Just for example, getting in the car with someone who's drunk. Now, I know that's wrong. I know that's stupid. And you say to me, why did you do that? That's a stupid thing to do. Why would you get in the car with someone when they're drinking? You know not to get in the car with someone when they're drinking. Yes, I know, but I can't articulate to you that everybody else was going to get in the car and nobody else was acting like they were scared. And I didn't want to look like the only stupid, scared one. So I didn't want to do that. So I just got in the car with them. But I can't articulate that to you. I almost can't articulate that to myself. I also believe that saying why is probably not that helpful in a lot of ways, because, like I said, it's hard to articulate why. But if you know why and you can look into it and you can look beyond the behaviour, then you can support a young person. They might know why someone else is doing something though, and they might find it easier to say, well, I get why she does that because, you know, her parents hate each other and there's all arguing going on, or whatever it is. Okay, so remember, the person is doing the best that they can, but equally at exactly the same time, they need to do better. They need to try harder and they need to be more motivated. And that can be done in quite a lot of ways. Now, that's not something I would say to a young person, but that's something that I would say to a youth engagement worker to support a young person. So we need to be helping that young person to find their motivation to change, and that will make it easier. So we need to praise them for when they are doing better and when they are doing well. And those little increments, those little goals will really help them to change the behaviour. So responding to self-harm. So your form of support should always be considered for somebody who is engaging in self-harm. Most disclosures tend to be with friends or family, and the initial reaction can play a really important role if you want them to disclose anything else. So firstly, I would say if a young person discloses something to you that they haven't disclosed to anybody else, I would say, well done you. You're obviously a fantastic worker who is building rapport with young people, is approachable, and is somebody who is a comfort to that young person. And I would always enjoy a disclosure. It gives you more to work with. People who disclose stuff are most likely looking to change and make differences. Responding to a young person in distress, and this could be any sort of distress. So we need to include them in discussions about all of the topics and issues, what's going on. Encourage them to share ideas and thoughts with you. Encourage them to think independently and develop their own ideas. Assist them in setting their own goals. Stimulate them to think about possibilities of the future. Compliment and praise them for well thought out decisions, and assist them in re-evaluating poorly made decisions for themselves. I'm just going to use an example of one of the things that we're doing in my house at the moment. We're trying to teach non-reactivity, and there's many reasons why non-reactivity is useful, but particularly if you've got ADHD like I have, and my son also has it as well. Reacting to everything is really hard not to do because we're impulsive, we're last word people, you know, all of that stuff. And a way of teaching about non-reactivity is well, we're using chickpeas, so you have to sit there whilst I flick chickpeas at you. Now it sounds completely non-related to any life skill that you could have, but believe it or not, when you're trying to teach a 10-year-old how to be non-reactive, you don't do it by going, right, I'm going to call you loads of names and you just don't answer back, right? That would be completely unhelpful. But this way is actually really working, and we're quite enjoying that sort of level and like learning. And I think a lot of us and definitely our young people, we're just not being taught life skills. Like I would love to see life skills like on the agenda, you know, on the curriculum. How, you know, what don't you react to? How quickly does it take you to say sorry? How many mistakes can you make before you really freak out? Like, and all of that sort of thing would actually be a measure of our emotional stuff and also be a measure of our mental health stuff. And whilst mental health is there, you can't see it. So you don't have any idea what I'm carrying and how I'm dealing with my stuff or what I'm dealing with at all. And for most of us, we are carrying tons of stuff, whatever it is. Like nobody is You can't leave anybody out. So yeah, so I'm going to teach you some different techniques to do with young people, because I think that's sort of what we're looking at. Like, whilst we're in lockdown, what can we be doing with young people to teach them and train them indirectly? It doesn't have to be specifically around self-harm, but it could be just a life skill, like being I mean, I'm sure loads of you would like to be non-reactive. You would love your mum to have thrown chickpeas at you when you were 10, so that it would help you have been non-reactive. But I believe that's actually quite a good thing, and it's quite a nice thing. So I'm not sure how you would do that on a Zoom call. That might be harder to do, but maybe there's other things that we can do. So I'm going to go through some of those. So these are some of the things that young people have said that have been really helpful to them. So writing a letter to the person they're annoyed with, or the person who's upset them, they just rip it up and throw it away. Listening to music can be really helpful. I don't know. I believe that music, if you're affected by music, then music can be very uplifting for people. So like, listen to what's making you depressed, but then flip it over and listen to some lovely music. This lady, young lady, she's using exercise to blow off steam. And exercise is a really good one for self-harmers, because it's moving meditation. It's you can't run on a treadmill or wherever. You can't run on a treadmill at all, actually. Tough, said Boris. But you have to concentrate. So whatever you need to do to switch your mind off or take your mind somewhere else. So I've given you some other examples of coping with emotional pain. So relaxation, soft or deep tissue massage, if you're lucky enough to get hold of any of that. But you might be able to give some of that for yourself. We've often taught young people how to give hand massages, and then you all sit there and you do like the hand massage thing when we're all back in when we're allowed to touch. Maybe you'd have to do hand massages with like gloves on and a screen and I don't know how it's going to work, but let's try something else maybe. Water for a lot of people, water showers, baths, all of that stuff can be really good. Anyone ever had a freezing cold bath before? If you don't get it, if you haven't, yeah, you have. Pete, have you? Do you like it? Has anyone heard of the Iceman?
Yeah, I do after runs or triathlons and things, and it's really yeah I enjoy it.
And when because it releases loads of endorphins, so it should make you feel really, really good. Freezing cold air shower or bath. But the thing to practice when you're in that scenario is don't let your breathing catch up with you, right? So you've got to really keep your breathing slow while that's happening to you. Again, that's another form of non-reactivity. Very, very useful skill. Let alone, look up the benefits of a freezing cold shower. You will be fascinated. Hugging, if you can hug, if there's anyone in your house you can hug, anything you can hug, dogs, cats, rabbits, birds. I don't know about birds. But patting pets, looking after pets is always a good one. Even like a virtual pet can actually be quite useful. The same, looking after herbs and gardening stuff, playing the drums, walking in nature, art, dance, photography, progressive muscle relaxation. I'm going to show you some stuff around that. But one of the things I was also going to say is that for a lot of the young people that you will work with, they will be highly sensitive people, so they will be impacted by music, dance, nature, photography. That they will really feel that quite deeply. But on the same level of feeling happiness very deeply, they feel their sadness very deeply as well. So it's really worth playing on the enjoyment side and letting them feel that enjoyment. So yeah, this is a progressive muscle relaxation, and I thought you could do this on a WhatsApp call with a young person, get them to do these examples. And a lot of progressive muscle relaxation is about either tensing up the muscles and then relaxing them, or like if you do it with your cheeks, you puff out your cheeks and try and make them really, really big, and then you just let them relax. I trained as a hypnotherapist as well as what I'm doing now, and we ask people to, we say, like, relax your forehead, relax your jaw, relax your eyelids, and believe it or not, when you are lying there and you're still and someone says relax your eyes, you're like, oh yeah, I can actually do that. That's actually a thing that is possible. And we don't even realize we're doing it. We don't often realize that we're clenching our jaws, or we're holding tension. So progressive muscle relaxation can help us to relax better. So turning your emotional pain into healthy physical pain. Massage, I thought maybe with a roller, that someone could do that at home. High intensity training, anything that sort of really brings up your heart rate, CrossFit, HIIT training, anything like that. Cold showers, and then equally the complete opposite, really, really warm environments as well. But all of that, like really sort of like tapping into how our body's feeling and what we're thinking, and yeah, the effect that something's having on us physically. When we get people to look after themselves, that's self-care. That's the beginning of self-care. So, for example, teaching a young person who self-harms about first aid and how to look after a cut if it goes wrong, or if it becomes infected, or just if it's just gone a bit too far, you're not going to make them cut more now they know how to use a steri-strip, but you are going to stop people who haven't got access to the correct stuff that's actually soothing. You know, if I put Germaline on a cut, it will numb it and help it to heal. Now, if I learn how to make things heal and make things better, maybe I'm going to start doing that a bit more. Maybe I'm going to start looking after myself a bit more. Yeah, it's much more healthy to teach a young person who self-harms how to do first aid, basic first aid, because that way they will look after themselves more, and it is the start of self-care. Health, well-being, and happiness. And I know these are all like Sufi kind of words, and people don't take it as seriously as they really should. But I can't really stress all this sort of thing enough. So compassion, so the desire to alleviate the suffering of others, so thinking about other people's pain. Generosity, so giving without needing anyone to know. I used to, when I was working in the youth clubs, we used to do this secret doers, and the secret doer would like go off and like do nice things for other people, but not expect anything back. So you'd like turn around and go, oh, someone's emptied the bins, who's done that? It's like, it's the secret doer. And it feels good to do nice things for other people. I'm sure you've all seen there's a billion apps and all sorts of resources around gratitude, but it's really not to be sniffed at. The research says that if we practice gratitude every day, we can literally rewire our brains. So I like the idea of rewiring my brain into a more grateful place. I think lockdown has given people a bit more gratitude for some of the things. I saw my mum in a park the other day, and I haven't seen her for ages, and it was really nice to see her, you know, and I was much more appreciative than I definitely was before. So I don't know how that equates for you, but there are tons of apps, and that's a really nice, that you don't have to say, look, if you're feeling down, maybe you should download a gratitude app. We should just be saying to all of our young people, I've heard that being grateful every day can rewire your brain and help you to feel good about yourself and help you feel good about everything. Let's give that a go. You know, it doesn't have to be because I'm trying to cut myself harming down. It can actually be just because I want to be a better, kinder, happier person. So I wanted to just use a different example so you could sort of understand. So I've used the playing the drums as an example of how playing the drums may actually be quite a good way to improve mental health. So for one, we've got rhythm heals the brain. Rhythm enhances the good stuff, the grey matter in your brain. Being totally engaged in rhythm will usually feel amazing. Drumming improves coordination, so you can smash the drums with all your rage and they won't break, which is a nice feeling. You can play with other people. It's a great way to connect with other people without having to speak, and it's great exercise. And I think for a lot of you, if you're working with a young person who's self-harming, like, you don't have to talk about self-harming all the time. It doesn't have to just be about self-harming. We can talk about other stuff as well. And this is some of the stuff that I'm trying to get you to think about. Okay, so I don't know if any of you are aware of Self Harm UK. So this is, and I've actually recommended this to a few young people whilst we've been in lockdown. They've got this Illumina program, and it's a 6-week program. You can do it online with other people where you sort of meet at a specific time every week, or you can sort of go at your own pace as well. I just done a screenshot of some of it because I thought you might be interested in it, and it's really worth recommending to young people. There's not normally more than 5 people at a time. There's videos. It's interactive. It's nice to work. You know, let's look at sort of like Alcoholics Anonymous and things like that. If we compare recovery rates to drug addiction, Alcoholics Anonymous has the best recovery rates out of everything that exists. So it can't be that bad being in a group, and it can't be that bad being with other people who are like you. Like, equally, we know that, I know that I've done groups of young people who've talked about drugs. I've talked about cannabis for an hour, and like negatives and positives. And the first thing that group of young people do as soon as I've walked out of the centre is they were smoking on the side. And it doesn't mean that what I said hasn't worked, because my intention isn't to stop you from taking drugs. My intention is to give you more information around it. So we know sometimes we put drug users together, they'll introduce drug dealers to each other and all sorts of things. And I'm sure that if you introduce self-harmers to other self-harmers, there are negatives, but we're definitely better as a group, and we're better with people who we can identify with. Yeah, so there's quite a lot of great online communities for young people. A bit more around coping. If you haven't done this before, I don't know about whether any of you have seen these, the love languages. This is so cool. And I'd be really interested to know if any of you, if you do it, I'd be interested to know, once you find out your love language, you understand how you communicate. Lydia, have you done this before? No, okay. I thought Lydia, she's like, oh yes, it's really good, right? But it's just a way of looking at our personality and how we communicate. You know, for some of us, I don't understand people who don't like hugs, for example. I'm a hugger. I like a hug. I don't get you non-hugging people. And in fact, I've even been known to try and like hug you into liking hugs, which for people who don't like hugs, it's really offensive, and it makes them actually makes them worse. It makes them more uncomfortable, right? So if you don't like being hugged and I'm hugging you, who's benefiting? Only me. And my intention was to hug you to make you feel better. So what's happened here? I've got to communicate with your love language in the same way with my own, right? So just sort of, yeah, this might help you just in life, actually. But it's a nice thing to do with a young person, to work it out what their love language is. Some different places where you can get information. Obviously, if you're worried about the well-being of someone else, you need to call 999 or A&E or whoever it is that will, if it's very serious. I very occasionally I've done these talks around self-harm, and I've had workers say, what if a young person self-harms in front of you? Well, firstly, it's very uncommon, but you would have to follow all your protocols then. You have to deal with that. And I guess a lot of that would be around your intuition of what you would do at that moment. Self-Harm UK has got great information, same with Young Minds. These are a list of groups that young people said that they found quite useful for them. Around, majority are around mental health and self-harm. These are some other, if you prefer to talk than type. I think young people love to type. I like to talk. And that is my whole presentation. So these are my details. If you want to get in touch with me, I would absolutely love that. I'm also going to put in the chat, we've got a lot of training coming up, and I'm really happy. Oh, Leanne, you've done the love languages. Oh, Leanne, you've been writing all stuff. I'm really annoyed now. I want to read everything you've written. Right, but this is, I've just sent it to Pete privately, but I want to send it to everyone. Hang on. Okay. So that's all our events that we've got coming up, and I'm really happy to offer you them at like a reduced rate. So don't book online, just get in touch with me, and I will. I'm really happy to support you. So I'm just reading what Leanne's written. Even what I've been told, it's also a way to control a part of life when they feel they have no control in other areas. Yeah, no, I completely agree. Self-harm really can be like that, particularly eating disorders and self-harm can be something that you do to take control. And let's look at what the situation that we're in right now and how out of control we really are. I mean, and I've said this about 100 times, but had someone told me that when I had kids, I was going to have to look after them 24 hours a day, I don't know if I would have had them. I mean, don't get me wrong, they're kind of cute, but 24 hours a day is hard going, right? So yeah, I would kind of agree with that. Does anyone have any questions? I'm going to open it up for you to ask questions. You can put them on the chat, or can we unmute them? Is that something I can do? Or do you unmute yourself if you want to ask a question? That's what you do. Unmute yourself if you want to ask a question. Can you see the relaxation slide again? No. Yes, of course you can. Hang on a second. Which one? So many relaxation slides. The relaxations. Have I gone past it? Yeeks. Relaxation slide. This one? Jasmine? I don't know. This one. It's this one, isn't it? I just stole this image from Google. So just put in progressive muscle relaxation and you'll find it. Yes, thanks. Fabulous. Does anyone else have any other questions? If you want to ask a question, just unmute yourself, because otherwise we're going to just go and enjoy the sun. I guess what? No, I actually think I'd ask you guys a question. So if you're talking to a young person on whatever it is, WhatsApp, telephone, whatever it is, however you're communicating with your young people at the moment, whether you think they're self-harming or they're not self-harming, what sort of things could we be thinking about giving young people, like, to support them whilst they're because I believe that when I speak to my youth worker, it's usually not when I'm really traumatized. Normally it's like, you know, nighttime when I'm feeling more traumatized. So what tools can we give our young people at that sort of time to take away so they remember to do them later on? Thanks, Annette. She's got to run off to a nightclub. Horse riding. No, can't do any of that, sorry. Can anyone think about what they would offer a young person? Even if you wrote it in the chat, I want to know what you are, because you're youth workers, you're creative, you've got the skills, right? This is your sort of opportunity. I believe that lockdown has been awesome for us youth workers, because we're like, oh, I could do this, that, and the other, and all these sort of things that we weren't able to do, we can do We can get super duper creative.
I mean, I didn't want to talk if other people want to talk, but something that I've suggested before is for young people to write in a grateful, like a journal, like just before they go to bed, because, and I have it, I'm sure a lot of people have it, but your thoughts suddenly come into your head when you're just trying to get to sleep, when you want it to be quiet time, and then all these thoughts start whirring round and round. So doing that just before you go to sleep really helps, and that might be like something you're grateful for, but also whatever negative thought you have in your head, to write it down, because then you've got it written down, and it's more about releasing that.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I completely agree. And I would also say that you should do your gratitude in the morning and in the night, and do it twice, because it can change. And what I wake up and I'm grateful for may not be anywhere near what I'm grateful for come the evening. So Pete said, should youth workers help young people to self-harm more safely, clean blades, etc.? And is there a difference in self-harming between male and female? So self-harming in general is the list that I've sort of given you. When it comes to suicide, suicide can be quite different between men and women, men being far more gruesome than women. But there's nothing wrong with giving harm minimization, like I said, around first aid. You know, I'm not frightened if I give a young person a condom that they're just going to go out and have sex with 100 people. We know that it's just preventing STIs and pregnancy. So helping somebody be better at first aid is only going to help them. It's not going to just make them self-harm more. I would also suggest like telling young people to talk to people, whoever that person is. So that might be a cousin, that might be a friend, doesn't have to be someone in your family. I think a lot of parents are very, very shocked when they find out that their child is self-harming. And it's kind of weird really, because does everybody know, is there anybody who knows everything about you? Everything? Of course not. Okay, because we've got some dark secrets, and we've got embarrassing stuff, you know, and equally that nobody knows everything about us. We will never know everything about everybody else, and that's not an offence, or because it's just how it is and how people are in general, and it's their stuff. I always, well, funnily enough, when I got married the second time, one of the things they said was, thank you, was that when you point your finger at your partner, you have three fingers pointing at yourself, and you should be thinking about like your part and like what your stuff is. And that's sort of the same with if you've been in any recovery, they say that as well, like accepting other people and like learning from our own stuff, like what's my stuff, what's getting in the way for me, that's sort of triggering that. Leanne's been doing a 30-day writing challenge, and they've put it on social media. Yeah, it's absolutely awesome. Be careful with these like daily challenges stuff, because for some people, when they sort of fall short, they berate themselves for it. So just get them to do what sort of is enough for them or isn't. Like I told my son to, I was like, write a diary. Everyone's writing a diary about this lockdown. You can show it to your grandchildren, because like nobody will have been through this experience. And about 3 days later, he goes to me, I feel really bad, but I don't want to do this diary thing. Like, do I have to do the diary thing? It's like, oh no, of course not. I couldn't care less if you do it or not. Like, we don't have to do it. You can do it with photos if you wanted to. You can document things via photos. It doesn't have to be written down, but like do what works for your young person. I try and get them to come up with a bedtime routine, no screens, listening to relaxing music, a bath, read. Amazing, yeah? But that's basic self-care. That's what you do. We all do it. It's basic self-care. Forget the self-harming, forget the behaviour, look beyond the behaviour. Teaching a young person how to look after themselves and have self-care it can only be positive for that person from now and the future, how they treat other people and how they treat themselves. Does anyone else have any questions? I think we're at the end. I'm going to go back to my my contacts. because I would like you to be in touch with me if you would like to be. And like I said, yeah, let's share resources and keep in touch with each other. Can I pass it back to you guys? Is that right?
Yeah, I think all the questions have been answered off the chat board and stuff. Yeah, Charlotte, that's been absolutely excellent. Thank you. And I can't believe it's been nearly an hour and a half of that input. So thank you very much for that.
Oh yeah, wait 1 second, Pete. Before you go, I will just say, please, don't go and watch something really depressing now. Go and do something uplifting. This is a very I talk about this so casually because I'm a grown up and I've been through it, but really don't underestimate the emotional stress of talking about all of this stuff. Go and be grateful, look at some water and leaves and kind children or whatever you need to do. Okay, sorry, go on. Thanks.
Yeah, no, I was just going to end and say the work that you guys do out there with young people is absolutely awesome, and I'm sure you're all magnificent practitioners. So yes, thanks for taking part. Look out for more on social media from the National Youth Agency and also from KIP. And I wish you all well and stay safe.